All right, so now we're going to hear from our moderators. So, Chris, please don't go anywhere. But we're going to go in the order of the panel. So, Chris, that'll give you a little extra time to think about what your key takeaways are. You just
communication is key. I'm done.
Yeah, and relationships, and yeah, okay. So, if you could come back up here, I'm going to ask. Yeah. There are 4 chairs, and there should be 4 of you. And Casey has the name tents ready to go. Uh-oh. So the deal is, don't worry about that. It's an offline conversation. It's a private thing between Brad and I. We have a good relationship, by the way. So the moderators are going to give 3 to 5 take-home type of messages here. And they're going to go through those, talk about them a little bit. I've asked them just to take about 5 minutes apiece in doing so. We'll have a brief time for comments, questions on those. And we'll probably do that as each one of you goes. So I think that's a little more important, just a couple, if there's any glaring things. And then we will basically be done in less than 30 minutes. And then I will wrap it up and we will be out of here. In case I forget to say it, at the end on the back of your program is a map to how to get to the Rayburn building and where it is and all that. I'll cover that again hopefully at the end, but that also will be very valuable once we're done here. So let's jump in with it. So Dr. Monty Graham.
So we're having a little powwow up here because I think there's a moment where they're all worried that I'm going to take everybody's take-homes. I'm going to take your take-homes and go home. And so I've had, the luxury of being able to sit on mine and mull it over the longest. And so some of these are a bit synthetic over the course of the day. I thought it was interesting. We started out with the interagency one, and then moved beyond just interagency to public-private partnerships, other forms of partnerships. So it was nice for me to be able to sit back and think about what was different about the interagency ones, and what are the key drivers of partnering between agencies, or even, as we learn, within an agency, that there are stovepipes or cylinders of excellence, however you want to look at that rainbow, that exists. So I would say with the public or with the interagency partnerships, they tend to be more driven by how do you leverage your mission against somebody else's capabilities. And I think that's key, is that you have to, the agencies to work together, while there is some indication that you can have overlap and maybe redundancy is good, you really can't go too far into somebody else's territory, or else you're encroaching on that mission. Whereas when you get over into the other forms of partnerships, you run into things that are driven more by how can what I do be leveraged with what you do to make more money, or to yield something additional in terms of productivity. It could be money. So it's more of a synergism driven relationship. So mission driven in interagency, I think, is important. We also spent a fair amount of time talking about data and data quality, data related issues as one form of the partnerships, and that was something that I hadn't really thought about much before coming into this, but it certainly emerged out of it. Obviously, communication being cross-cutting, that was something that I think cross-cut across all, so you all can use that one as well in your 3 to 5. And then the other one that I thought was really interesting was the comment about identifying and characterizing the risks associated with I'm sorry. But I thought that was a very important one too. Is that it? Two more minutes. Well, I saw your sign and I panicked and I just ran through them. So I could tell another fish joke. So I'll just be brief. There's nothing wrong with a good. There's no such thing as a bad short speech.
No. Okay, I'm going to summarize 3 takeaways from the SOS panel you heard today. These are my takeaways, but the floor is open, I think, after. One is a success story, and Rick Murray mentioned that, and Captain Bunn, I think, would concur that the UNOLS is a real success story. In terms of the partnership aspect, the theme of this today's meeting, I mean, UNOLS works. It's a partnership, of course, between agencies and operators. I'll use our example. The agency is NSF, the operator is the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and UNOLS, of course, works with the scheduling. I think many of us understand that that's a success. I don't think I need to really go on about that, but that was definitely a strong point of the SOST panel, in my opinion. So the success is one, opportunity is another, and challenge. And in terms of an opportunity is the NOP, the National Ocean Partnership Program. I see lots of nodding heads, so I feel like I did my homework right. And to quote Darren, I don't know if he's still here, he may be back doing important things, but it is strong and it's underutilized, is what I heard from Darren. And I think that that is an entity for the ocean science community to come together around, and I think perhaps ocean leadership could take a role in that regard. It sits in Navy right now. Is that the best use of the NOP? Is there a better use of NOP? There's always a better use of an opportunity. So I heard that. My third takeaway is a challenge, and that was a question from Marlon Lewis, who pointed out all the great things that are going up north in Canada, particularly in Halifax. But let's face it, the U.S. should be a global leader in ocean science and technology. Why not? I am from Canada, so I get to say that. But that's an international opportunity that I think that we could do, well, a challenge that we can address, and it actually is being addressed, and I'll actually point that Senator Murkowski pointed out this new Arctic Research Icebreaker Consortium, which was great to hear, because Sikuliak's part of that, is one example where, in this case, the EU has taken a leading role in coordinating multi-nations around polar vessels, polar research vessels. So, you know, I think that there's an opportunity and a challenge both there for the United States in terms of SOST's role in coordination on the international scene. I don't see a stop sign, but I'm also someone who's usually very brief, so I'm going to, oh, good, thumbs up. All right, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm next. I'm going to take a different tact here. In the first two panels, there was a barrier that was identified that inhibited industry, federal partnerships, and it was identified that there was a barrier. And then later in the public-private partnership session, I think there were some suggestions on how to overcome that barrier. And so one of the success stories and suggestions was from DIUX, I have to remember my acronym there, about revamping the acquisition to deal with the mismatch in time periods that it takes industry and sometimes academia and even government to react to things. And so I think one of the solutions there moving forward is to re-examine some of the acquisition protocols that the organizations have that are looking to partner. Another aspect of dealing with that mismatch in being able to move on action items is to have the right people in the room at the right time, have the financial people, I think this came from Monty's panel, in the room early so there's no surprises later, and also have the right people in the room early from a public-private perspective to talk about things like IP and data release, and that will help avoid obstacles later. One of the take-home messages, I think, from the P3 panel was about managing expectations. And I think communication falls into that, but proper roles and responsibilities outlined early. I'm also thinking about transparency would go into managing expectations, and also revisiting those expectations on a regular basis in case things have changed. And let's see, talked about re-examining of the university culture was also a take-home message, I think, where often the university is really focused on publications, but maybe re-examining as a nation how universities encourage, incentivize, or reward things like IP and partnerships. I think that's an action item as a whole, I think. And you took my risk adversity. I think that I'm good there.
Well, it's good to go last. Several of mine have been taken, so I'm going to be even briefer than I might have been. But I do think you really put a good context on it, that the first two panels, we're talking more on a even 30,000-foot scale, and we were really focused on, particularly the last panel, on solutions, and I think that our panels complemented each other well that way. I think that some of the take-homes for us would be, as you said, the clear roles and responsibilities. Our group, obviously, Chris and Kelly had obviously worked out a very clear agreement up front. Everybody understood what they were supposed to do. They also were creative in using the foundation that was associated with the University of Southern Mississippi. So there was creativity that was instilled in there in order to be as expeditious as possible. They also were recognizing and trained. Kelly worked with her university to say, we need to recognize the other's culture, and we need to be able to respond quickly if we're going to have this opportunity. So making sure people understand, I mean, what you really did was set the path for your staff to understand this is the expectations. It gets back to expectations, but it really gets back to understanding each other's culture, and that they took the time to understand each other's culture by building the relationships. I mean, they did have, apparently they've broken much bread together, and I mean, it sounds silly, but we frequently forget to get to know each other on the personal level. A fourth one would be that this really was authentic. And I think, we're not looking for partnerships just to have partnerships, but there was a clear need on behalf of Chris's company, and there was a clear role for Kelly's institute. So authentic partnerships tend to go easier, I think, in the long run than ones that may fit. I mean, the bad dates, I guess, analogy, where you sort of have a few values in common, but not all your values are in common. Incentives, as you said, looking for the incentives, and you talked about the university one already with the publishing, and that's a really good recommendation. But also the incentive for the company was not just getting the research, but they now also have the credibility. They're able to say, we're partnering with the University of Southern Mississippi, and there is value in that. Probably, particularly, Chris, if I'm not wrong, when you're speaking with regulators, federal regulators, state regulators, you're working with a very respected institution. So there are incentives on both sides, and making sure you understand when you go into a partnership, what are those incentives that each of you can offer so that it is a fair partnership as well, which gets back to being authentic. And then the last thing I heard from them, I'm trying to avoid communications and relationship because that's the easy way out, but I will just put it and say respect. There is a respect of each other that, and what I mean by that is they look at it and they respect each other's culture, but they also respect each other's role. They respect that this, while Chris may be commercial, he respects the fact, then they may be academics, he respects the fact that they do understand industry, and if not, he's explaining it to them, and and there's an understanding and a respect for aquaculture. And I'll just say from my own experience, at one point I was meeting in my former life I was with a conservation NGO, and I met with an energy company, one of the largest energy utilities, and was sitting across from them after we were done. They said, you're the first NGO that's ever come in here that's treated us with respect. Most of them treat us like we're idiots. And I thought, that's really was a shame to hear for the conservation community, because these people went to Ivy League schools. They were not stupid. And we might have had disagreements on approach or opinion, but they were not stupid people. So I think at the end of the day, it is, we all come at it with different agendas, and recognizing the agenda, but recognizing that we all bring expertise to the table, I think is probably going to be one of the biggest ways to find solutions as opposed to finding barriers. And I think that's what Chris and Kelly did really well together.
Any quick thoughts, comments, questions? Looks like everybody's been talked and discussed into submission. So I want to give these folks a round of applause of a very few but very important concluding remarks. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it. Stay there, step down, whichever you want. Yes, they're all going to get out of the way. Thank you.